You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney. And guess what? Another week. And so little time and so much to talk to and talk about, my snarky friends. Yes. So we've got to get right to it. We're going to be talking about some important stuff today, but I don't want to tease it just enough yet. What I want to do is hop into our weekly roundup of Christian crazy. And who's everyone's favorite Christian crazy crush? It's Jim Bakker. You know it is. He's the one everyone just desires in the realm of crazy. And I don't want to sit here and just block you guys from getting what you want. Because again, it's so good. For me to unpack it fully ahead of time would be to steal it from all of its insane glory. So I'll let Jim talk, and I may interrupt. I may not. I may interrupt. I'm just a tease here. But all you guys want here is you just want your Jim. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of Slim Jim. Here you go.
There's nowhere on earth you could live with more of God's generals here. We're outside of Branson, Missouri. Is where our address is Branson, but we're outside a little bit. We're on the other side of the lake of Branson. Branson has the #1 Christian theater in the world.
You're talking about Sight and Sound,
which don't sound that spiritual, probably. The Sight and Sound. I tell you what, you all are going to know.
Wait a second, Jimbo. Sorry. I hate interrupting you. I want to be able to give you all the praise and all the accolades that you need. And me interrupting you at this moment is not the most respectful thing I could do, because I should be down at my knees worshiping you, but I'm not. And I'm sorry. What did you say? What was that you just said? Branson, Missouri has the best Christian theater in the world? What is this? How have we not heard this? I know everybody else in the world is consumed with the fact that Avengers, the new Avengers movie, is dominating the box office, but, sir, you say that Branson, Missouri has the best Christian theater that exists in the entire world? Stop the presses, everyone. We absolutely must hear more about this. This is breaking news. If I've ever heard this, please, continue on.
Soon, why God brought us here. Do you know the people from the government, from the NASA, the research from so many of them? They have said in their research, the safest place to live in troubled times is right here. That's why God brought us here.
So, at the end of the world, I'm actually speaking absolutely non-snarky, absolutely straight with you people here. At the end of the world, we want to be at a place where they're the best Christian theaters that the world can provide. I mean, that is essential for us. I mean, it's honestly beyond essential. Water, food, screw that. Screw it. Christian theater is what we need once the apocalypse happens. And this pioneer, this man of faith, is telling us something. God bless Jim Bakker. Because here's why I think that he is absolutely above the fray. Just amazeballs here. In the past, Jim has been pushing on to us his survival food buckets, which have been very helpful for all of us survivalists that are sitting here waiting for the apocalypse to happen and wanting to make sure we have nom-noms when it comes to, famine. But now Jim is telling us the best place to buy condos for the apocalypse. Wait, I'm sorry, not condos. His condos for the apocalypse is Branson, Missouri. I mean, in these troubled times, it is just a wonder. I don't even understand how selfless this guy is, that he's instructing us that for any place in the United States, any place that will be safe when the end times come. Because when you're in the end times, the only thing you want to think about is, do I want a house? No. Shelter? Forget that. Apartment? Screw you. Condo? Absolutely. Absolutely. And as Jim Bakker tells us, there is nowhere on earth you could live with more of God's generals here. I mean, I think he's speaking pretty plainly. Speaking from the heart. Also, maybe the pocketbook. But seriously, I mean, anytime you throw in the word NASA to an argument, it inherently sounds more scientifical. And who am I to judge Jim? Who am I to mock Jim? Not me. I would never do that on this show. Because apparently NASA has declared that Branson, Missouri, the ass crack of the United States, as the safest place to be if we have a catastrophic event. So, for all of you out there listening, you know what? Find yourself warned. If everyone's not flocking to Branson right now, you're signing your own death certificate. I'm sorry. Jim said it. It's got to be true. And if Jim said it, it's bound to be a boatload of insane BS, because if you're just tuning in right now, this show is called Snarky Faith Radio. And if you don't know what snarky means, you should at least know what sarcasm means. And we are thick with it. This is like the thick fettuccine sauce of radio right now. So if you've taken anything I've said to heart right now, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You apparently don't know my radio voice. It goes from this: serious to sarcastic. And anytime I say Jim Bakker, I feel like I'm just going into the whole just verbiage of Martin Short. I can't even say his name straight. Let me do this. Let me try it. Try this again. Jim Bakker. See, I can't even do it. I can't even take him seriously, because no one in the world should take him seriously. No one should take him seriously, let alone the Better Business Bureau or, please, the IRS. If you're tapping my broadcast right now, this dude is a fraud. He is defrocking people of money. He's saying he's doing it for Jesus, but no, he's not. He's not. He never has. No. Don't anyone be fooled by good old Jimbo. He's just a fun guy trying to steal money from people that are unwitting and stupid. and honestly just really stupid. But it works. And maybe I should actually just rethink the format of our show. Maybe I should do that because I could probably make a lot more money if I did that, but then I would hate myself and I would just resort to eating the buckets of food from Jim Bakker that I've already bought and killing myself in the midst of that. I'm sorry. We went dark here. We don't ever go dark on the show. Oh my gosh. Faux pas. Sorry. So guess what? We're in the dark period. We're kind of in like the midnight period of our crazy Christian talk. And so we've made it through like the first half of that, but there's more, and I'm sorry. Just hold fast to your loins of hope that we will make it somehow out of this insanity, because we've got more insanity before we get to the delicious encore of our show, or main course of our show. So before we get to that deliciousness, I'm going to give you something, well, maybe I would say crazier. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it's crazier. So here we go.
Just want to finish up on our conversation about whether Wiccans, that is, worshipers of the devil, followers of witchcraft, whether they have First Amendment rights under our Constitution. And the answer is that they do not. The blunt, simple, direct, straightforward answer is that Wiccans do not have First Amendment rights, nor do Muslims, nor do Jews, nor do Native Americans, nor do Rastafarians, nor do any practitioners of any other religion other than Christianity.
Now, if anyone's not picking up on the cadence of this lovable Christian, squeezable Care Bear of love and compassion, that would be Bryan Fischer. Bryan Fischer, who's the host of an anti-gay American Family Association Christian inspirational information radio show. I mean, come on, people. Don't be haters. Don't be haters. Seriously. This guy loves everybody as long as they're not Muslims or gay or the Jews or whatever else he has on his long list of people that he hates. Because really, that's what religion's about. It's about figuring out who you're supposed to love and having a long laundry list of the people you're supposed to hate. So, tiny bit of love, a lot of hate. Oh, Bryan Fischer, you're such a fun guy at cocktail parties because you're the only guy not drinking at cocktail parties, but still spouting out stuff like you're drinking. Oh, really? Really? So I'm sorry, I had to break in on this. He's got much more to say. And much more for us to make fun of. But I at least felt like I gave him his intro. I gave him his kind of idea for what he wanted to say, but I really had to butt in here because if he talked much longer without me speaking or interjecting, I was going to shit my pants. So, Bryan with a Y, continue?
Because Joseph, and again, I'm just quoting Joseph's story, so this is not my idea. I didn't come up with this idea. This is Joseph's story, the eminent historian of the First Amendment and the Constitution. Look what the Founding Fathers were driving at here in the First Amendment. They weren't even considering Islam. They weren't even considering Judaism. They weren't even considering Native American religions. All they were dealing with, all they were considering was Christianity. So whatever the First Amendment is about, whatever protections it extends in the federal Constitution, those were just for Christianity. So Christianity has First Amendment rights under the federal Constitution. No other religion does.
So just because our founding fathers didn't know about things meant that it wasn't contained in the Constitution or First Amendment rights. Right, Bryan with a Y? Really? So the internet. Our founding fathers weren't thinking about the internet, so nothing on the internet should be conceived in that manner. So anything that wasn't invented or conceived by our founding fathers should not be contained in the First Amendment right. I love your logic, especially when you stick your head so far up your ass that you can't hear anything anymore, besides the moves of your bowels. What the hell are you talking about, you moron? I mean, I understand people wanting to appropriate belief systems and totally like craft them in a way that only makes sense to what you believe is what you believe, and what anybody else believes is irrelevant. But really, you're going in somehow like posthumously, like you're going in to our founding fathers' brains as they are dead and rotting in the ground, and being able to say, no, they had not conceived X, Y, and Z. Because I know this. Because I know how things move. Or essentially, I have gone and spoken with the spirits, which, again, in your realm of Christianity would be very bad. But I have gone and spoken with them, and they had said, no other religion other than Christianity. Really was what they meant in the subtext of the First Amendment. What the hell are you talking about, you moron? I have no idea what you're getting at here. I mean, I understand why you're getting at it, but if you want to try to use logic for what you're getting at, there is none. The gas tank is empty. There is nothing left to say. And this is like the worst reading of context and subtext that I've ever heard in a situation like this. Well, they were not thinking about Muslims. They were not thinking about the LGBTQ at the time. So this really only applies to Christians because it fits my worldview, and that's what makes me comfortable and helps me to sleep at night because of my nightmares of anger and loathing and hate and bigotry that I have that goes on with my head. No, shut the hell up, Bryan with a Y. I am serious. Really, shut the hell up. Because you have no idea what you're talking about. Not that my show is going to dissuade you from your own crazy crackpot views on life, but really, I mean, let's kind of let's just think this through a tad bit more. So, anything that was not conceived in the imaginations of the founding fathers is not covered currently in the Constitution, which, in a certain sense, would be you. I'm pretty sure, in a certain sense, they didn't conceive you. When they were like writing up the Constitution. They didn't conceive me, so I'm not covered either, and I'm in big trouble right now. But you as well. So I like how we lay upon this almost the same respect that we would give towards reading biblical scripture. In the way that we would read biblical scripture saying upon what God has conceived. Is it the founding fathers or is it God? Or are they all kind of the same in our own self-masturbatory thoughts about how we look at the way our country was founded? Because, again, let's return to the idea that we all know that our country was founded on Christian principles and values that killed so many thousands of Native Americans. That included slavery of unwilling participants from Africa, because all of this is based upon Christian values, which it's not. And I love this, how Christian conservatives like to somehow treat the Constitution in a way that they do biblical scripture. But in the same way that they treat biblical scripture, they kind of treat it like their own bitch, where they kind of slap it around and use it in the way they want to and make it work in certain situations, but not in other situations, just to be able to prove certain points. So it gets really nasty and dirty. And I would go ahead and tell people like you, Bryan with a Y, that stop using scripture like your bitch and stop using the Constitution like it's your bitch, because it doesn't really work that way. The Constitution wasn't meant to necessarily just serve you and whatever you're saying at this moment. It was kind of meant to serve a blanket statement. In many ways, like biblical scripture was meant to lay out an archetype for the ethical way that the kingdom of God was meant to be laid out upon a certain group and a certain people. That same ethic that really doesn't ascribe to the way that the Manifest Destiny version of America kind of came to be. The American way of just get what you want to get and squash anybody that's in your path, that kind of a way. Yeah. So you can use scripture as a weapon. You can also use the Constitution as a weapon. It doesn't mean that's the way it was intended to be. So stop trying to hop into the wet dreams of the founding fathers to be able to justify your own misogynist, bigoted, hateful, angry ways of reading the First Amendment. So are you right? No, God, no. Or even if you're an atheist, hell no. You have no idea what you're talking about. You are a sad, sad human being. But, we will use your sad human beingness to launch us into our main conversation when we begin to use the government to justify religion. And recently, President Trump has made an executive order. It was an faith-based initiative that he's calling the Religious Liberty Executive Order. And for all of those out there that are faithful and religious, we will listen to this and say, ooh, religious liberty? The government is ascribing to us religious liberty? This sounds intriguing. Tell me more. Well, point one, it's Trump, and religious anything in Trump doesn't really make any sense. And also, attaching religion to the government is also really problematic. Let me think about this. In every case that ever has happened, the government is the government, religion and faith is religion and faith. Never shall the two meet. But don't worry about that. Our orange messiah, he's there. He is there. He is warming up in the batter's box. He is ready to go to bat for the people that he has nothing in common with, but that provided him the presidency. So let's go ahead and talk about the problems of the president's new religious liberty executive order. Because what more fun we have to talk about on a Tuesday than prattle like this. But here we go! So I'm sorry, but we are going to have to dump into some, or take a dump, into some deep weeds of what we're going to be talking about today. And what I want to begin with doing, and the NPR did a great job having an annotated take on Trump's executive order on religious liberty. And he did this last week. Last week. And he begins by saying this, and I want to read through what he had said here, and I'm going to give kind of NPR's unpacking of this, and then we'll kind of dive deeper into the muck and mire, into the swamp that Trump is draining, but at the same time filling. So, it begins by saying this. By the authority vested in... Wait, I don't have a good Trump voice, so I'm just going to go ahead and just do it with my own voice. I'm sorry. By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution, barf, and the laws of the United States of America in order to guide the executive branch in formulating and implementing policies with implications for the religious liberty of persons and organizations in America. And to go further, and to further compliance with the Constitution and with applicable statutes, and presidential directives, it is hereby ordered as follows. Barf. And every time you hear barf, that's me. I didn't assume you'd think that. So, Ton Gielton from NPR says this. So this is his little piece on. We're going to go this by piece by piece. The president has limited authority here. He cannot change the law related to political participation. Only Congress can do that. He can, however, instruct the Treasury Department to back off enforcing it, which he does. And we talk about the Treasury Department here, and we talk about religious organizations being 501c3s. These things are regulated by the Treasury Department and the IRS. And this gets problematic. And we had a show a little while back about why repealing the Johnson Amendment was an issue. If you want to go find this, go to www.snarkyfaith.com, look up Johnson Amendment. We had a whole show on this. And I would like to descend back into that, but we have this prattle to go through. So, Section 1 from Trumpy. Policy, period. It shall be the policy of the executive branch to vigorously enforce federal law's robust protections for religious freedoms. The founders envisioned a nation in which religious voices and views were integral to a vibrant public square, in which religious groups and institutions were free to practice their faith without fear of discrimination or retaliation by the federal government. For that reason, the United States Constitution enshrines and protects the fundamental rights to religious liberty as Americans' first freedom. Federal law protects the freedom of Americans and their organizations to exercise religion and participate fully in civic life without undue interference by the federal government. The executive branch will honor those protections. Wonderful. But when we were listening to Ryan with an R earlier, and many of the people that follow President Trump, this idea, which I thought Ryan with a Y had a good point when it comes to evangelicals. They believe that these kind of protections for religious freedoms are really only held by evangelicals, because evangelicals are the bastard childs of Christianity that elected Trump. Don't believe me? Listen to Jessie Taylor, who has her take on Section 1. And she says this. This is largely symbolic, a symbolic gesture designed to reach out to some of the president's most reliable supporters, white evangelical voters. Protections for religious freedom are already enshrined in federal law, including the 1993 Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which was signed by President Bill Clinton to reestablish, quote, a standard that better protects all Americans of all faiths, in the exercise of their religion. It was upheld in a 2016 decision. Jessica continues on saying, however, the Supreme Court ruled in 1997 that the RFRA does not apply to states, which has led some states to pass their own versions. Vice President Pence, as governor of Indiana, passed a version in 2015 that was met with widespread backlash, as it could have allowed for the discrimination against the LGBT community. It exempted private businesses, such as florists, caterers, from having to work with same-sex weddings, for example, if their personal religious beliefs oppose such marriage. Pence later signed a revised version. So this leads us back. This leads us back to the core evangelical tenet that has to do with effing wedding cakes. Because as people are raised in the Christian faith, the one thing that we have been told to fear more than anything is not Satan, not sin. It's not even like bigotry or hating others, or which is essentially bigotry, or living out a life that is non-compassionate, non-graceful, that would be in the line of Jesus. No. Apparently, over the last while, we've been warned that the real sin, the real fear of evangelicals is effing wedding cakes. because they are terrifying. Have you seen them? Most cakes, most people, most Americans like cakes that are 1 tier. But these bastards, they go for 3 tiers. I mean, seriously, are they trying to show off? I mean, what's going on here? And then they put little, wax figures on top? Oh my God. What are they doing? Looking down upon me? Judging me? What's happening here? The big problem here is that wedding cakes, by and large, are evil. Now, we all can agree that they are evil and heinous, and wedding cakes really should all be thrown in the trash. But the really evil, like the evil squared, the triple evil wedding cakes are the ones that are done for the LGBTQ crowd. Oh my gosh. Not only do you have 2 little judgy people sitting on top, heterosexually, you have a man and a woman, they're sitting on top of the cake, judging the rest of us, which is like the golden calf that Moses was against. No, those are bad enough. But if we had 2 men or 2 women on top, oh my gosh, that just sends all of us into spiritual overdrive. It makes it even hard for me to eat the cake or fully enjoy the wedding. I mean, I'm really hoping you guys are stopping in the deep sarcasm that I'm speaking about. I've written about this. I've gotten roasted by a certain denomination about this that I was a part of for talking about the fact that wedding cakes aren't the problem. It's our hearts as Christians. And ultimately, my answer is really, you're going to put your stake in the ground over wedding cakes. Sorry, getting off the topic, but getting back on the topic. Section 2 of this illustrious executive order. And it is the most beautiful, most amazing, most winningness executive order that I've ever read. Section 2, respecting religious and political speech. All executive departments and agencies, agencies, shall, to the greatest extent practicable and to the extent permitted by law, respect and protect the freedom of persons and organizations to engage in religious political speech. Basically saying, babies, you can do everything up until the level of the protection of the law. You live wide in that. Sorry. In particular, the Secretary of Treasury shall ensure, to the extent permitted by the law, that the Treasury Department does not take adverse action against any individual, house of worship, or other religious organization on the basis of such individual or organization speaks or has spoken about political or moral issues from a religious perspective. Oh, hold on a second. Let's listen to Tom Gelton give his take on this from NPR. This language is of little legal significance. The Treasury Department is not authorized to take action against religious people or institutions beyond what the law permits to do. Moreover, the Johnson Amendment does not prohibit clergy from speaking about political, moral, or political issues from a religious perspective. So the Treasury Department has no reason to restrict such speech. The amendment only prohibits churches and other tax-exempt organizations from, quote, directly or indirectly participating in, intervening in, any political campaign on behalf of or opposition to any candidate for elective public office. Here, the president is instructing the IRS to back off enforcing the Johnson Amendment. Yes, that's what he's saying. But in reality, the IRS is not really enforcing the law now. There are churches across the country that get involved in politics already without consequence. African-American churches, for example, are quite outspoken in support of Hillary Clinton during the 2016 election. In Tom's perspective, I'm going to tell you, there have been many, many churches of the white evangelical persuasion that had also told everybody within their congregations to vote for Trump because he was God's chosen, he was the way to go, and if you're not voting for him, you're effing sinning, my friends. This Johnson Amendment issue needs to be enforced. And I know from a person that has worked in nonprofits that were Christian nonprofits and churches that were 501c3s that the Johnson Amendment needs to be upheld because this is a very dubious thing. This is a very dubious thing, especially if the IRS is not looking in on this. Why? Because religious organizations or churches, or wait, let me just pull this back. Denominations, which are kind of like small political action groups or PACs, have the ability to be able to speak out and support certain candidates without reciprocation. That's kind of a scary thing because they are 501c3 nonprofit organizations, but based on the way the churches are regulated by the IRS via the Johnson Amendment, they're not really held accountable to the things that they are saying. So certain denominations are allowed to be able to endorse candidates and also in certain ways endorse their congregations to funnel money into said candidates, which is highly problematic and, as I will mention, has nothing to do with Jesus or the kingdom of God that the Bible speaks about. So everything we're talking about right now, actually from the beginning, well, crazy Christian stuff, we're trashing these morons of the faith. But as I've delved into this religious liberty executive order, what we've delved into here is the fact that something that seems innocuous to most people. Oh, Trump signed another executive order. He signed it. Doesn't really mean anything because most of what he does is meaningless and he doesn't even know what he's signing. He just likes putting his name on things. But this is another thing that he's doing to try to protect the base that elected him in order for them to continue to act politically, for them to continue to be bigoted, and use their quote-unquote faith to be able to discriminate against groups of people, which is effed up. It's wrong. And it's nothing to do with Jesus. But you know what, guys? There's Section 3. There's Section 3. And one of the things that should actually scare you a little bit, not about Section 3, about the whole thing, is that Paula White, and I know it sounds a lot like Paula Deen, but no, not that Paula Deen. Paula White, one of the president's main evangelical advisors, the one that looks like her face has been cryogenically frozen in time. I know we're not supposed to comment on people's looks, but she apparently saw the Lord and her face was frozen in that time and hasn't moved since. The woman that's been twice married, but is at the year of the president because of her holiness. Paula White and the other charlatans that back Trump right now, probably Jen Jefferson and everyone else like that too, love what he's doing right now. They love it like it's Spanish fly for their faith. And that's a problem. Like that alone should make people alarmed. Like, wait a second, these people, these charlatans love it? Oh, hell, this is bad. But I'm going to get to Section 3 right now. And I know for all of you, this sounds very technical as we're walking through this, but I actually want you to be able to think through the crazy BS that the president's throwing out here. This is stuff that, again, we have to remember, he did not write. We've seen how he tweets. He can't even, his grammatical structure on a normal sentence does not exist. His use of ellipses is out of the park. He has no idea how to do anything grammarly. So these are being done by other people, and the moron is just signing them into effect. And religious folks just clap. Clap, 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 clap. Because it's wonderful. Because it's moving forward our agenda. Section 3. Conscience protections with respect to preventative care mandate. The Secretary of Treasury, the Secretary of Labor, and the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall consider issuing amendment regulations consisting with applicable law to address conscience-based objections to preventative care mandate promulgated under the Section 300 GG 13 parentheses A parentheses 4 of Title 42 United States Code. So clear, so clear. But Scott Horsley, NPR White House correspondent, can you unpack this for us a little bit? And Scott says, sure, I will. I'll read Scott's quote here. The section calls on the relevant government departments to draw new rules that will presumably allow any employer with a quote-unquote conscience-based objection to birth control to avoid providing such coverage, even indirectly, to its employers. Under the Affordable Care Act, workplace insurers plans are required to include coverage from birth control with no out-of-pocket costs to the employee. Churches have always been exempt from that rule. After protests, Obama administration developed a workaround for religiously affiliated schools, hospitals, and others that didn't want to pay a role in offering birth control. After the Supreme Court ruled the Hobby Lobby case, this workaround also extended to certain religious-motivated companies. So pause on Scott. I'll get back to Scott in a minute. This is the beautiful thing of all this. That these companies that do not want to be able to provide birth control are also, so they say, birth control, a problem. We don't want it. And we also don't want abortions. So we are giving people that are living their life no respectable, payable medical way to be able to afford getting pregnant. I feel like we're going back into the times of like the Catholic Church where they're like, their answer is, hey, guess what? The rhythm method is free. Just exercise it. Or, as the Catholic Church would say, but never says, but through the way that they do this, is just don't be a whore. Just don't be a whore. Which, the funny thing about that is they only say that to women. They only say that to women. And especially when we talk about birth control and we talk about abortions when it comes to this stuff, it never has to do with men. Men get a free pass on this. So they can stick their little pee-pee wherever they want to, but it's women that get the moral outrage for this. It's women that need to pay for birth control. It's women that need to care about being able to make a choice for their own bodies. It's women's fault. And wait, I never said that religion is misogynistic, did I? Oh, sorry, I did. And this only exemplifies what I was already saying, which is kind of already fun, but also sad for everybody that has to deal with this. I will gladly say that I was wrong if people can get birth control and the ability to be able to have abortions if necessary in these situations. Because guess what? It's not about abortions. It's about women being able to have a choice about their own bodies and what they want to do with them. And speaking in that regard, yes, I will totally take a foul and say, Stuart's totally wrong, but the government will do the right thing and allow women to be able to get birth control through their employers and also at the same time have a choice based upon whatever they want to do, which way or not with their bodies. That's a problem. Because again, when we talk about this issue of pro-life and pro-choice, if you look to the Bible, and I know conservatives aren't going to like this, God's a whole lot about personal choice. Oh, he really is. Yes, God's really big on this idea of personal choice. I'm not going to make people make a choice one way or the other. So why do conservative evangelicals want to take choice away from people? Like, yeah, free will, that whole thing, that whole bit of theology. Let's not talk about that because that's too close to home. But yes, this is part of the effed up part of this that is really just falling hard on women and has nothing to do with men at all. So I'm sorry, Scott Horsley continues saying the workaround allows employers that don't want to offer birth control coverage to issue notice to that effect. In those cases, their insurance company will provide the contraceptive coverage itself. Some employers, such as Little Sisters of the Poor, sounds like a fun group, which runs nursing homes for the indigent, are not satisfied with this, as they feel it still makes them complicit in the provision of birth control in which they have religious objection. Again, I'm going to go back to this. Free will. It's core tenet. Pretty big core tenet of Christianity. I'm not talking Catholic. I'm just talking about Christianity in general and in the Bible. Free will. The idea that people can make their own choice, whether you want to judge, whether it is with God or against God, free will is a big friggin' choice. And the idea that women can't even choose on their insurance plans to be able to get birth control, they have to pay it out of their own pockets, and they have no choice when it comes to whether they want to have a baby or not want to have a baby. That's a huge issue. And the bigger issue that no one speaks about is the fact that where are men in any of this? Nowhere to be found. Because these women aren't going to be having a baby without a man present. If I've taken biology at all, for the most part, you can come up with a couple aberrations with people getting artificially inseminated, but overall, why are the men not involved in this? Why aren't the men really caring about this? Why are the men the ones that are probably pushing against all this stuff? I don't know. Shame? Issues? Other stuff? I don't know. It's murky. It's murky. It's murky as hell. And again, one of my reasons why the religious need to step out of all this crap. And yeah, Section 4, Religious Liberty Guidance. In order to guide all agencies in complying with relevant federal law, the Attorney General shall, as appropriate, issue guidance interpreting religious liberty protections in federal law. Okay, Jessica Taylor, please speak to us from all of this crazy governmental speak. She says this: the section is incredibly vague, yes, and gives the Justice Department broad leeway in interpretation. For some of the president's most fervent supporters, the executive order doesn't appear to go as far as the draft executive order that leaked in February, which would have radically redefined what constituted a religious organization and could have opened the door to possible discrimination towards the LGBT community. Quote, today's executive order is woefully inadequate. Trump's campaign promising Americans that he would protect their religious liberty rights and correct the violations that took place during the previous administration, end quote. The Conservative Heritage Foundation's Ryan T. Anderson wrote, again, quote, Trump's election was about correcting problems from the last administration, including religious liberty violations and the hostility to people of faith in the United States. This order does not do that. It is a mere shadow of the draft leaked that was in February. And as we begin to march down all of this, what does this say? What does all of this mean? As I have talked through legalese, which I have had to heavily lean upon other people to be able to unpack, because as I read it, my brain explodes. And also, we will note that the president did not write on his own. He has his aides and other people that think and have agendas and don't eat cheeseburgers a night. Those people, those are the dangerous people that are his underlings, that he doesn't care about what they do. He just wants to have his big, fat signature on them. What does all this mean? So to unpack this, let's go to Vox with an article from Tara Isabella Burton. And she begins probably midway through her article. She says this: the institution of faith-based initiatives is not uncommon in the White House. Barack Obama launched the Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, and George W. Bush instituted the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. Both programs were designed to provide faith-based charity organizations with a clear avenue to get federal funding for their work. That said, Trump's initiatives seem to expand previous offices' remit in a number of ways. For starters, the office isn't just focusing on community-based or charitable initiatives. According to the Religious news service. It's also charged with informing the administration of any, quote, failures of executive branch to comply with religious liberty protections under the law. The Trump administration has consistently been the champion of religious liberty, particularly insofar as it pertains to evangelical Christian causes. She continues saying, the last year, for example, the Justice Department filed an amicus brief for the Masterpiece Cake Shop, back to cakes, a Supreme Court case in support of a Christian baker who refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. Likewise, last October, the Department of Justice released a memo telling its federal agencies to allow maximum discretion for those claiming religious exceptions on the grounds that it was not the government's place to challenge the, quote, reasonableness of religious belief. This is very problematic. And what I'm going to end this with is an article I wrote many years ago about this cake issue. And this is an article that got me into, FCC regulations would tell me, a crap load of trouble. I would use a different word. And within certain denominations, I got in a lot of trouble for this. But either way, I'm still going to read it because I love it and I think it's right. And it goes like this. It's called Love Beyond Rules. If you're a Christian, I don't care what your orientation is when it comes to same-sex marriage. This isn't about debate or picking sides. When it comes to debates, it's never as simple as two sides. It's nuanced if you're actually trying to have a rational dialogue. Though, when it comes to this issue, rational dialogues are few and far between. But enough of that. I honestly don't even care what you believe in the issue, so listen up. If you claim to follow Jesus, you're called to love. I'm not talking about, quote, loving in theory. I'm talking about actual, real, tangible acts of love to one another. Let's also go ahead and kill the, quote, speaking truth in love remark that so often comes up. If you're not actually speaking love, it's aching to the times when someone prefaces a comment, don't take this the wrong way, but we all know what follows that setup is bound to be offensive. In the same way, I've rarely seen someone, quote, speaking truth in love in a way that's oriented in love or compassion. It's the typical setup for being hateful and or judgmental when it comes from a place of piousness. You know, that place where I'm right and you're wrong. It's broken my heart to see how Christianity has been engaging this whole issue with their heads in the sand and their middle fingers raised high in the arrogance culture. Because two middle fingers don't form a cross, even though that's how many Christians are depicting their faith. I was recently speaking at a conference about engaging culture. One gentleman asked me a question, which is more of a statement than a question, that went something like this. Homosexuality is rotting our culture and faith. How do we combat this? I sat there for a moment trying to figure out how to engage in such a comment. Then I asked, have you ever shared a meal with someone that was homosexual? Ever befriend someone from the LGBTQ community? His response was, why would I ever do that? One of the biggest flaws we have when approaching Jesus is that we only see his divinity. His divinity is easier to embrace than his humanity. Divinity is something that we can't really grasp, so in turn we grab hold of it in an ideological sense. It's a concept. The humanity of Christ is often too close to home for us, and I think it scares us. Thinking of Jesus as flesh and blood challenges us. The things he did, the teachings he taught, were for us to walk out, not just to philosophize about or theorize about. His humanity confronts our humanity. And when it comes to concepts of love, if we claim to follow Christ, we have to see it as an act of rebellion. Think rebellion is a bit much? Well, let's look at the people Jesus loved. Over and over, we see him reaching out to the marginalized in society, offering hope, compassion, and love. The prostitutes, tax collectors, lepers, hurt, forgotten, and broken. People that were fully entrenched in the human experience, and especially those under the boot of the corrupt economic, political, and religious systems of the time. The basic point of the argument is that Christians feel their religious beliefs are being trampled on because they'd have to cater to homosexual weddings. This is funny, how pious we become in such situations. For those that are standing on their religious high ground, let's fully run a bit with their logic. That would also mean that they should not be making cakes for divorced people, murderers, or pretty much anyone who sins. And I'm thinking they should put into place a pretty lengthy application process for anyone that they do business with. Does putting two grooms in atop a cake really mess with your faith? Because I'm pretty sure there's something in Leviticus about abominations that include a man bitten by a radioactive spider and getting superpowers. So sorry, Johnny, no Spider-Man on your birthday cake for you. I'm being fastidious, of course, but you see the point. The problem is that we're getting to this place where our faith is run by preference and not by ethics and not by reason and not by compassion and not by love. And we see this happening in the Trump administration, and it's sick and it's disgusting. And Christians will stand behind these BS executive orders and cry victory. But at the same time, Jesus is crying for those that he called to follow him. Well, that's all I've got this week, and I will catch you again next week, and I send you out with the holiest of snark.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all of life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be a better day than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.